Well, thank you everybody for joining us for our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Samir Desai. My name is Alyssa Harlow, and I am the Director of Marketing here at MD2B Connect. We're very happy to have you here with us today. We're going to be going over some of your Google Form questions that you guys had submitted. We did get a lot of questions, so we may not be able to get to all of your questions tonight. And there were a little bit of questions that were pretty specific. So if you do have more questions or we aren't able to answer your question tonight, we highly recommend reaching out to our team, any one of us, especially your client service representatives. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. You guys should have Dr. Desai's number as well at some point during your rotation. So that is available to you if you'd like to contact him as well. And then if you guys need anything whatsoever during your rotation, after your rotation, before your rotation, you are more than welcome to reach out to us. Any one of our team, we're happy to help. And it doesn't even have to be rotation related. It could be residency related. If there's anything support wise that you need, we really want to be there for you. So please let us know if there's anything that we can help you with. And I think with that said, I will pass it off to you, Dr. Desai.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Very warm welcome to all of you, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us tonight on Residency Real Talk. This is a webinar that we do regularly to keep you informed and updated on the latest in the residency application and selection process. Here at MD2B Connect, we are very much about empowering you with information. We have seen that when people have the right information, they can make informed and evidence-based decisions that can bring you closer and closer to your goals of a successful match. And we try to help you get there in different ways. And so we are much more than a company or organization that puts you in a rotation. We believe very strongly about taking a very personalized approach with all of you. So it's a great pleasure for me and the whole team to get to know you in this process. And I love, talking with each and every one of you. For many of you, I've already spoken to. Some of you who have recently joined our rotation program, I have yet to speak to. So I'm really looking forward to that. And when we do speak, I love to take a deep dive into your situation because you are all unique. You have your own paths that you have walked. You are all reaching for different goals. And it's, always a joy for me to get to know you much better over time and see, what you're really excited about and what I can do to help support you and get you through to where you want to be. And we do that again in different ways. So obviously rotations are one part of it, but we believe strongly in professional development and mentorship. And we also believe in giving you the resources that you need. So we have things like books. Some of you already received several books in the mail. You may have already received The Successful Match, which is a 650-page book with detailed information on how to present yourself here in the residency application and selection process. You'll also receive a book called Success on the Wards, which will teach you how to maximize your learning in rotations, whether they're outpatient, inpatient, community hospital, university hospital, whatever the rotations you are that you're doing. It'll give you a lot of insight into the culture of rotations and what it takes to make a great impression on those with whom you're working. So you'll be getting those books if you haven't gotten them already. And then we also have a lot of information on our website. So you all are familiar with MD2B Connect, and there we have an extensive blog which goes into different aspects of the residency application selection process. You may not be as familiar with our sister website, which is thesuccessfulmatch.com. I encourage you to visit that website as well. We also have a blog there that is very, very extensive. If you go to that website at the upper right and click on the blog, you can get a lot of high yield information about different aspects of the process, whether it's the application, the personal statement, letters, residency interviewing, what have you. And you can search for what you want in the blog search engine. At that same website, thesuccessfulmatch.com, there is a podcast at the upper right. It's called Success in Medicine, where we cover different aspects of the residency process and then devote full episodes to different pieces of this puzzle. So I encourage you to go and visit thesuccessfulmatch.com. The material there is complementary to the books that you're receiving. We can update our blogs on MD2B Connect and thesuccessfulmatch.com much faster than we can with our books. In addition to that, I am going to be available to you not just during this rotation, but throughout this process. You'll all get a direct line to me. So I'll be talking to you if I haven't talked to you already. And for those who I haven't talked to yet, you'll be hearing from me soon. And once you have a direct line to me, I really want you to stay in touch with me so I can understand how things are going for you, what's going well, what are you worried about. I'm here for you to help you navigate some of these hurdles. The way I look at it is, if tomorrow I wanted to leave the US and go to another country and practice medicine there, I would need to lean on somebody who has been in that country and who has, strong working knowledge of how things work. And so I'm very sensitive to that. I really admire and respect all that you're doing to get established here in the US. And I'm happy to support you any way that I can. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. So with that said, I want to share my screen so I can show you my PowerPoint. And what I've done is I'm going to go over some key aspects that I think we need to highlight at this time of the year here in early July. And then I've also included many of the questions you all have submitted. Great questions, by the way, that you've submitted to us. As Alyssa said, there are a few questions that are highly personal, highly specific, that are going to be easier for me to address one-on-one with those individuals that ask them. So if you didn't see your question answered here today, all that means is that we're going to answer them together when we have our one-on-one conversation. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need to get your questions answered. So let me go ahead, Alyssa, and share my screen. Give me a second.
Sure. And one comment while you're bringing that up, Dr. Desai, I'm going to be sharing resources inside of the chat. So I'll be sharing links to blog posts, YouTube videos, various resources for you that are relevant to what we're talking about today. So if you'd like to share those and keep them for your own keeping, they'll be in the chat for you. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, Alyssa, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see your screen. If you guys want to let us know in the chat if you're able to see Dr. Desai's presentation, that would be helpful for us. But I think that you can go ahead, Dr. Desai.
Okay, let me advance the slide. And do you see the second slide? Alyssa, do you see the second slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. So we are here early July. And there's a lot to be thinking about and a lot to do. We start first with important dates. A few of these dates have already passed. So we know that the ERAS season has opened up. We know that tokens have been released, but some important dates coming up. Of course, the one that you want to put on the calendar and circle is the ones here in September. This is the dates when you can begin submitting your applications to programs in early September. September 24th is when they can begin reviewing their applications. Very common question that comes up is, do you have any advantage if you submit your application in the early part of September? And the answer to that is you do not have an advantage over other applicants who submit later in this window. So this window between September 3rd and the 24th, all of those applications are considered to be part of the same batch. Now, getting your application completed earlier can be beneficial to you. Setting an earlier date and operating with some urgency ensures that everything gets done. And if something is not yet done, gives you the cushion of time that you need to get it done. So what I would suggest for everyone is not use September 23rd or early morning of September 24th as your deadline. Use an earlier date and try to do everything in your power to respect that date and work feverishly to complete your application by that time. Now, if you do get everything done early, what are the other benefits? The other benefits are you can start preparing for the next phase of this process. So we can divide the whole residency selection process into two parts. The first part is doing everything we can to get interviews, right? And then the second part is doing well in the interviews. Now, doing well in interviews is all about residency interview preparation. So you need time to do that. Now, although most interviews are taking place in the months of November, December, January, there are some programs that might offer you an interview invitation in the month of October. And so if you are taking your application all the way to September 24th, if you get an interview with fast turnaround time, that may not leave you with a lot of time to prepare. And so that is one of the benefits of starting early and getting your application in. Another advantage that you have if you can get your application in is it allows you to do some networking. And it allows you to focus more on networking because you've cleared your desk of all these other intensive activities. So if you've gotten your application in, now that huge deal, right, with getting your application in is not on your plate anymore. Now you can focus on other things like networking. You can also begin to create emails of interest, so-called letters of interest that you want to send to programs after the 24th. And that process of creating letters of interest is time intensive. And so the more time you have, the more you can do and the better job you can do on those letters of interest. What ends up happening for most applicants is you go all the way to the wire, September 24th, you turn in your application, and then you start getting really, really busy with letters of interest as well as interview prep, and things continue to take up a lot of time. So anything you can do to offload some things a little bit earlier can be to your advantage. Now, one other date to keep in your mind, September 15th, that's when the NRMP registration opens. Now remember, just because you turn in your application doesn't mean that you're in the match. You have to register with the NRMP. The NRMP is the body that administers the match, and you can do that on September 15th. Now, do you have to do that on September 15th? No. You can actually register for the NRMP during this cycle. You could do it in October, November. But if you can get it done earlier, it's done, it's out of the way, because at the end of the season, there are always some applicants who forget to register for the NRMP. And so when the programs sit down to create their rank order list, they can't find the person because the person hasn't registered for the NRMP. And so then they have to reach out to the applicant. At least that's the hope, that they'll reach out to you, right? Because if they can't find you, there's always that concern that they might not put you on the rank order list. But even if they do reach out to you and say, hey, we can't find you in the NRMP, that's probably not the look that you want to give to a residency program. So my advice to you is let's get that done early so you don't have to worry about it later. Now, what are some other important dates? There is a series going on at the AAMC. It's called Optimizing Strategies for Your Residency Application. These are webinars where the AAMC invites program director to participate in a discussion that is specialty specific. So some of these have already taken place. You can see the ones that have taken place here in June. Some are yet to come. I would encourage all of you to go to the AAMC website and take a look at what these are. This is not on this slide. It's not an exhaustive list, but if you haven't had your specialty featured yet, it may be coming up soon. So you can sign up for that and attend it live. Don't worry if you missed something. You can get the recording and access that whenever is right for you. Now, it's July 2025. What do we need to be working on? So we need to be working on researching programs. So much of this is dependent upon the quality of the research that we perform. And researching programs does take time, as I'm sure all of you have figured out. Now, one of the things that you want to do is create a block of time every day to research programs. If you set aside 45 minutes to an hour every day to do this, you will make a lot of progress by the time the calendar turns to September. And what are you trying to do through your research? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to identify the programs that you're going to apply to. And there are a lot of programs out there in every specialty. So that's why this can be a daunting task. But when you're going through the programs, you have to utilize a number of sources because there is no perfect source, unfortunately, of information. So you're going to utilize such sources as the program's website, the AMA FRIDA, Residency Explorer. You can even use our tool on our MD2B Connect website, which is our IMG-friendly residency programs that we break down by state. But you need to use multiple tools because they have complementary information. Now, what are you trying to determine through your research? What you're trying to determine is how your profile matches their residency selection criteria. And that's what you will find out, the criteria, so to speak, from these different sources of information. You're also trying to determine which programs are IMG friendly and to what degree they are IMG friendly. That's not all you're trying to find out. You're also trying to determine what is the mission, the purpose, the goals of that particular program, and how does it align with your own interests. This is a concept of fit. So these are the things that you're trying to determine. You need to have a way to organize this information. So you have to collect it, you have to organize it, you have to have some sort of database where all of this is kept so that you have easy access to refer to it. Now, this research of programs is going to help you in a lot of different ways, not just which programs you apply to. It's going to help you determine which programs to signal. Talk about program signaling in a little bit, but that's a relatively new feature of the residency selection process that started a few years ago. Your research of these programs helps you decide which programs you're going to signal. And since you only have a relatively small number of signals, this is very, very crucial. Your research of programs helps in other ways. If you want to write a program-specific personal statement, which is something that you can do, then the information that you obtain from your research of these programs will allow you to tailor your personal statement to that particular program. If you want to write a letter of interest, the research that you do of your programs will give you the material you need to write something meaningful, effective, and resonant to programs, and which will increase the yield of that letter of interest in terms of getting you an interview. So there's a lot of different things that come from your research. And we haven't even talked about how your research programs will help you down the road with interviews. So this is what you should be spending your time on. And again, if you put in your daily calendar research programs and you have a block for that, you are more likely to make progress towards your goal. It's far easier to do a little bit of this every day than to say, okay, it's Sunday, I'm going to do I'm going to have this massive day of doing all kinds of research. Better to do a little bit every day. You'll take this Herculean task and it will chip away at it, and you'll get to where you need to be in a couple months. Now, remember, no source of information out there is going to be perfect. That's why you have to use multiple sources of information. Every year, what happens is because people are busy, they don't get to research the programs as well as they would like. And then what happens because of that is you don't have a great list of programs or an accurate list of programs you want to apply to. Sometimes you use your signals in a non-strategic way because your research has been lacking. And so we end up suffering when we don't do that research. Now, what else do you need to do besides researching programs in July 2025? We need to start thinking about and working on our ERAS descriptions. So the residency application is extensive. There's a lot of different fields to complete, but one of the key parts of that application are your experiences. And for every experience you list, you have the opportunity to describe the experience. Those descriptions are crucial. So it takes time to craft those experiences, those descriptions. And the earlier you start, the more likely it is that you're going to get to a point where they are compelling, and that's what you're trying to do. So start thinking and working on your descriptions. Letters of recommendation. Now, this is one of the components where you don't have full control over, right? We have control over the research that we do of programs. We have control over completing our residency application, but the letters of recommendation are in the hands of someone else, right? These are our attendings, our preceptors, the physicians with whom we are working, and we need their support for this very, very vital piece of the application. Presently, letters of recommendation are the second most important factor that residency programs use in the selection process. So we know that this is incredibly important. So we need to ask for the letters of recommendation. So if you've completed a rotation and you've identified that preceptor or attending as a letter writer, if you haven't yet asked for that letter, now is the time to ask them for a letter. Now, I always get asked this question, what's the best way to ask people for a letter? The best way to ask people for a letter is in person. And you want to think very carefully before you make your request of how to make that request in a professional manner. Now, in our book, The Successful Match, which you have or will be getting very soon, there is a 40-page chapter on letters of recommendation that walks you through everything you ever wanted to know about letters, from how important are they, what are program directors looking for, how to ask. It's going to spell it out for you there. And so ideally, it's something that's done in person. Now, I'm a big believer that letters should be collaborative. So the next point I want to emphasize is we have to help our letter writers write the best possible letter. Every letter writer wants to write a meaningful letter. And it's our job as an applicant, as a student, to collaborate with our letter writer to make sure that the letter that you're deserving is written. Now, why is this important? Okay, so I'm a professor of medicine at the Baylor College of Medicine here in Houston. So I work with internal medicine residents and our Baylor medical students. And every time I'm on service, I have a senior resident, so that's a PGY3, 2 PGY1s, a sub-intern, who's usually a fourth-year medical student, and a couple of third-year medical students, and maybe a PA student. So I have a pretty big team, and it's my job to oversee this team and make sure the patients that we care for get the highest quality of care, but it's also my job to make sure that we learn a lot from each other during this rotation. And it's also my job to support their professional development and help them with their growth. And if they're planning to move on with their career, to support them in their efforts. And I want to do a good job. But you can imagine from an attending's perspective, when we work with a lot of different people, we remember your qualities, the ways in which you shine during the rotation. We recognize your work ethic, we recognize your teamwork, we recognize these things. But what we may not have easily accessible in our minds and in our brains is the examples of how you demonstrated strong work ethic, or how you went in above and beyond on a particular day as a teammate and as a team player. So when I say we want to be collaborative, we want to provide our attendings and preceptors with the information that will help them support the praise that they're going to include in the letter. So that is what we want to do. Attendings and preceptors are receptive to this type of thing. And that is the type of conversations that you want to have with your letter writers. And that is what I mean by helping your letter writers write the best possible letter. Something that is meaningful, something that reflects your performance, and something that's going to provide insight into who you are and what you have to offer to the residency programs. Now, the letters of recommendation are not the only thing that are not under our control. Remember that our medical school has a role to play in the residency selection process. And so we must coordinate with our medical school to finalize those documents, whether it's a transcript, whether it's the MSPE, it may be the internal medicine structured evaluative letter, So that is something we need to work with our school, and we need to start that process as soon as possible so that there are no delays in those documents being finalized, uploaded, and accessible to residency programs. Finally, in July 2025, we need to be thinking about networking, and we need to not just be thinking about it, we need to be doing it. Networking is important for every applicant type. So USMDs, USDOs, and IMGs. And for the purposes of the residency selection process, we can define networking as efforts to establish relationships with physicians in the United States that will further your situation and bring you closer to the attention of a residency program. That is what we're trying to do with networking. And this also goes back to researching programs. So when you research programs, you need to identify IMG-friendly programs that you think you have a real shot at, a good shot at. Those are the programs you want to think about in terms of networking. Like, how can I get closer to that program, right? That's what networking is about, is identifying those people and then making contact, developing a relationship, building that relationship over time. And the hope is that in October, that some of those people in your network will advocate for you at programs. That is what we would define networking to be for the purposes of the residency selection process. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about researching programs. I said earlier that no source is perfect. You want to utilize all the sources of information available to you. Probably the one that gets the most attention is the AAMC Residency Explorer. This is a tremendous source of information. And every year after the match, they could look at it and assess its effectiveness as a tool, and they make adjustments. They add new material, so it's constantly being analyzed and reevaluated. And so for every specialty, there can be changes. I'm just going to use internal medicine as an example. So there are always some new features that are added. So for 2026, they've added some new features for interview data in terms of graphical representations in the form of bar charts to highlight interview rates. One of the things that they're trying to do is draw some distinctions between different types of internal medicine programs, whether they're preliminary, categorical, primary care tracks, physician scientists. This is information that has been hard to come by in the past. So, this is a real positive step, in my opinion. We have licensing exam scores, we have program signal data, and we have a highlights feature, which is a short paragraph that the program submits about their program and what makes it distinctive and what sets it apart from other programs. And that can be very helpful when you're trying to understand what's important to that program, what the program's all about, what their mission is. Again, goes back to this concept of fit. It can be something that you can use in different ways to show that fit between you and that program. Now, with regards to the residency application, we know that most specialties use the ERAS application. There are some exceptions, like emergency medicine, obstetrics, gynecology, ophthalmology, but also realize that there are programs in ERAS participating specialties that may not use this application. So I would encourage all of you, as early as you can, to go to ERAS, view the participating specialties and programs page, and take a look at all the programs that are there, and it will tell you whether they are participating in ERAS or not. And should you come across programs that aren't or have not made their intentions clear, then you need to take another step. You need to go to their program website and see if they have their own application or they're participating in a different application system, because you don't want to know this in early September. You want to know this as early as possible. So please do not skip this important step. So we just got through saying there's other application systems out there, Residency CS, Common Application Service for certain specialties. All right, what are some things that are new with the application? So there is a section of the ERAS applications called academic/professional interruptions or extensions. when you look at your application, I want you to pay very close attention to the wording here. It's not uncommon for people to have taken leaves or gaps during their medical school education. But please note the wording. There's two questions here. The first question is, have you had any academic extensions, leaves, gaps, or breaks in your educational program due to repeated or remediated coursework? So you're going to either answer yes or no. If you have to answer yes, you're going to have a box in which you can describe what it is that happened. The second question is, have you had any professional extensions, leave gaps, or breaks in your educational program due to professionalism, sanctions, or any other adverse actions by your medical school or its parent institution? Again, you will mark either yes or no, and if you mark yes, you will have a box to explain what it is that happened. Now, there can be other reasons why people have extensions or gaps. People can take a year or two out to do research. People may have a leave for something else, something family related or personal health related. So keep in mind that those are not academic extensions or professionalism sanctions. So I want you to pay close attention to this wording. Now, another new feature of the ARS application is there are some specialties that have introduced specialty-specific questions that need to be answered as part of the application. These include anesthesiology, neurological surgery, and plastic surgery, the integrated track. Now, in the application, we said earlier that the experiences are very, very important. So you have 10 experiences you can list. And for every experience you list, you get to fill out some additional fields. Each experience can be categorized into one of 8 types. Work, research, you have an experience that is a combination of volunteer service and advocacy, another one that's education and training, military service, other extracurricular activity or club, professional organization, and finally teaching/mentoring. Now, an important exercise to do right now, if you haven't done it already, is make a list of every experience you've been involved in medical school, college, residency, whatever it is, post-residency. Be all inclusive. Do not leave anything out. Include one-time events, include events that have gone on for years, and take a look at that list. Because what you'll be able to see is how many experiences do you have. So that's the first thing you're going to be able to see. The second thing you'll be able to see is what experiences these are, like what categories do they fall in, okay? And from that, you're going to be able to do a few things. If you're somebody who has more than 10 experiences, let's say you have 15 or 20, well, you have to then decide of those 15 or 20, which 10 you're going to feature. If you're somebody who does this exercise and realizes you have 7, well, that's okay, because we have 3 months to do some resume building. We might decide that there's a few more things that we need to do. And so this is an important exercise to do. I'm very happy to do this exercise with each and every one of you. So when we talk over the phone, we can do that together. And that way, we can take a look at everything and see what are the experiences that would serve you best as you move forward based on what you're aiming for in terms of specialty, what you're aiming for in terms of programs, and what is important to you and what you want to communicate to programs about your interests and how it would be seen as fitting into what those programs are looking for. Now, when you list an experience, you link it to what is called a primary focus area. There's a lot of different primary focus areas. These are the ones here. And you want to read the definitions of these in the ERAS user guide so you can make sure that you place it in the right focus area. You also link each experience to a key characteristics, and there are a number of key characteristics. So again, You want to make sure that you link it properly. You also want to make sure that it's evident in your description why you would be linking it to this key characteristic. If you are listing these key characteristics, one thing you should keep in mind is that 3 of your 10 experiences are going to be what we call meaningful experiences. So up to 3 of them you can identify as meaningful. And what that does for you is, in addition to having a description box to describe the experience, you get a second box to explain why this is so meaningful. And one approach in the meaningful experience description box is to write about how this has influenced you or shaped you in relation to that key characteristic that you have selected. Now we're going to turn to your questions. So the first question that I want to address has to do with step scores. So somebody asked us, since the ECFMG certification process hasn't started, how will that work for an IMG since I can't take step 3? I have a low step 1 score of 225, but secured 265 in my step 2. How do you think PDs will rank my application compared to others with a step 1 result of pass? Okay, so there's a lot to take in here. So first of all, before step 1 went pass fail, step 1 was arguably the most important factor in the residency selection process. And the reason it was the most important factor was, there were a couple reasons. Number one, it was something that everybody had in common. US medical students and USDOs, they generally take step 1 or its equivalent. And many of them didn't necessarily take the step 2 by the time they had to submit the residency application. So with step 1 being something that just about everyone had, that was something that was an easy point of comparison between different applicant types. The second reason why it was such an important factor was that there was a body of research, evidence, that had come out where people had studied step 1 as a predictor of performance in residency. And while they found that it was a relatively weak predictor of overall residency performance, that it had a good correlation with your board certification exam. So every specialty, right, at the end of your training, you're going to take a board certification exam. So the step 1 score has the strongest body of evidence in terms of a correlation with board certification exam. Now, we all know the step 1 went pass fail a few years back. And there are still some applicants who have a numerical score if they happen to have taken them before it went pass fail. Now, when we asked program directors at that time, when step 1 was going pass fail, what did you anticipate changing in your residency selection process? They mostly replied that the step 2 would take on more importance. And that made sense, right? Because step 2 remained numerical in its scoring. And that would be now the exam where everyone would have a numerical score that would allow for comparison. Okay. So that was what was anticipated. Now, a few years have passed since step 1 went pass fail, and we actually see that step 2 is the most important factor in the selection process as it relates to making interview decisions. Step 2 followed by letters of recommendation. With that being said, the surveys that we do now of program directors do not ask program directors, how do you view people who still have numerical scores on step 1? My personal experiences when I go to academic conferences and I interact with program directors and other people on the selection committees representing different programs and specialties is that most people have moved on to looking at the step 2. And those people will generally look at a numerical step 1 score And we'll look at that as that's a pass. Now, could there be some program directors, because they've had so much experience with step 1 scores, that attach some value to the step 1? The answer is yes. There's going to be some, but it's going to be, in my opinion, a small percentage. Now, for this particular scenario, what we have is a very high step 2 score of 265. So that is going to be an important part of how they're going to look at your application. And in terms of step 3, there is a small percentage of programs that like to see the step 3. Very small percentage require it for interview consideration. A growing percentage recommend it. But many people, even in this day and age, can match into residency without a step 3 score being available at the time you submit your application. Now, with your score being 265, that's a pretty strong predictor of passing the step 3 and passing your board certification exam. So I feel that in this particular scenario, that you're not going to be at any major disadvantage because your step 1 score was 225. Let's move on past step scores to letters of recommendation. We had several questions from people asking about chair's letter and the IMSEL. So let's talk about what this is. So the IMSEL is what it is known as today. This is the Internal Medicine Structured Evaluative Letter. It used to be known in the past as the chair's letter or the chairman's letter, or it was known as the Department of Medicine letter. Now, other specialties, so non-internal medicine specialties, some of them also want to see chair's letters. Okay, so but for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to focus on internal medicine because the questions we received were mainly focused in this area on internal medicine. So the question is an IMSEL necessary? So first, to understand that, we have to ask ourselves, what is the IMSEL and why is it valuable? So the IMSEL, as I said before, used to be known as the chairman's letter or the Department of Medicine letter. This is a standardized type of letter. It's got a template. So it has these pre-populated fields. And the internal medicine rotations that USMDs and DOs do are very similar in the sense that they're structured in a similar way. The evaluations are structured similarly. The exams at the end of these rotations are similar, often the same if they are using NBME exams. And the sub-internships that USMDs and DOs do, typically in their early part of their 4th year, are also very similar in nature from one school to another. Therefore, when the Department of Medicine creates these IMSELs for their USMD and DO applicants, there's a tremendous amount of value that they get out of it. Now, for international medical graduates who come from so many different countries all over the world, the educational system is very, very different. And the internal medicine rotations that you do don't have that same structure. And so the value of an IMSEL for an IMG is not as much, nowhere near as much as the value that programs get out of it for USMD and DOs. Now, that being said, the challenge that we have as IMGs is that our sources of information are not very transparent in drawing distinctions about the IMSEL between USMD and DO applicants and IMG applicants. So when you read the websites or you look at other sources of information, it's not very clear when they say one of your letters should be an IMSEL, whether they mean that if you're an IMG. Now, when I go to conferences and I ask this type of question, I will say that most people I talk to don't find that much value in the IMSEL written for people who are coming from other countries. One of the things that I've been advocating for, because I belong to the Alliance for Academic Internal Medicine, which is an academic society that makes recommendations on the residency selection process, is greater transparency in this area. So what I would suggest to all of you is when you visit program websites and look at other sources of information, look at the wording of what they say for the IMSEL. If they say that it's required of all applicants, then you have your answer for that particular program. But most of the time, it won't necessarily say that. So if you don't see that transparency, there's nothing wrong with writing to the program and asking that question. Is an IMSEL necessary? Because in my opinion, an IMSEL written in another country is not as valuable for most programs as a letter written in the US by a preceptor or an attending. But again, that decision has to be made on a program by program basis. So you can write to the program and ask that question. I would also not hesitate to ask that question at program events. So in the months of July and August, programs will start having events that you can attend. And so if you're not following programs via social media, I would encourage you to follow them because they will notify you of upcoming events, whether they're Q&A sessions with the program director or town halls or meet and greets. That can be an excellent way to learn about whether the IMSEL is required by that particular program. And that can help you make a more informed decision. Now, because it can be hard to get this information, I always tell people, if you can get an IMSEL from your home country, great. Let's do that. But if you can't, and there can be reasons why people can't, it's not going to prevent you from getting into residency. There's many, 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 many programs where an IMSEL is not a hard and rigid rule. So to answer your question, will the program filter us out if we can't get one? For most programs, no, but there may be a small percentage of programs that really want that. And sadly, we don't have enough transparency in the process to know for sure which those programs are. But if you have the benefit of time, which we do right now because it's early July, we have 2 months plus of making some inquiries so that we can learn whether that's something that is a requirement. Staying in the category of letters of recommendation, do programs value LORs from other countries? So there was a study, it's a bit of an older study, that asked residency program directors, do you attach value in letters of recommendations written by physicians in other countries? And only 7% of the PDs said they attached some value to that. So it's not 0%, but it's pretty low. And that's why you'll hear that common refrain, where people say, hey, don't get LORs from other countries. If you can, get it from people here in the US. Now, are there some situations where LORs from other countries can be helpful? The answer is yes. If you're in a situation where you simply can't get your letters here in the US, maybe you have some letters in the US, but maybe you don't have all of your letters in the US, then we have to use our LOR from our home country because we need to meet the requirements of the programs to which we are applying. Again, if you're going to get letters from other countries, hopefully your preceptors will let you take a collaborative approach. And so I would encourage you to work with your professors in your home countries to write a letter that's going to be meaningful. Now, what are some other situations where those LORs might be helpful? If you've done a residency program in another country, program director letter of recommendation may prove insightful to residency programs in the US. If you've worked with somebody distinguished in your home country, there are professors all over the world that are known to people here in the United States because they may be very academic, they may be meeting each other at conferences, they may be having collaborations. Somebody who like that who writes a letter, that may carry more value because it's somebody that they recognize. So that is something to take into account. If your professor in your home country is somebody who trained in the US and has a lot of perspectives on what it takes to be successful here, then if they include in their letter that they have that background, then what they write may become very, very meaningful to residency programs. So there are definitely some exceptions to the rule. Now, the second question here is, if we meet the minimum requirement with US LORs, would it be beneficial to add one from a different country? So possibly, but when you're sending LORs to a program, you want to pay very careful attention to the wording on the LOR part of their selection criteria page. What do they say? Do they say we only want 3 letters of recommendation? Well, if that's the case, they're telling you pretty clearly that they don't want a 4th letter. If they just say our minimum requirement is 2 US letters of recommendation, then you can potentially send them another 1 or 2, okay? Because they're not indicating that they only want a certain number of letters. So again, with every one of these programs, this is where your research comes into play. But if there are spots available for an additional letter, then I would prioritize a US-based letter over a home country LOR. But if you don't have a US-based letter, then it may be fine to submit one from a different country. Let's move on to questions about the application. Somebody asked, what 10 experiences do you think will make an impression on residency programs? So this is where the exercise that we talked about earlier will be very insightful to you. The reason you want to list all your experiences is that's going to help you see on one page what are the different possibilities, right, that you can have for your 10 experiences. Now, I'm a big believer in showing people that you're well-rounded. So if you have experiences in teaching, mentoring, in advocacy, in research, in community service and outreach, that's something that you could feature, right? You could use experiences in all those different categories to show that well-roundedness. Now, depending upon, and the reason why I say that I'm a big believer in that, is that as you do your program research, you'll see that these programs have different missions. Yes, there are some university programs that are very heavily research-oriented, but the majority of programs are not focused on producing researchers. They're looking at producing clinicians. They're interested in producing clinician educators. Some programs are interested in producing people who are advocates for the underserved, and the list goes on. And so showing your well-roundedness allows you to appeal to a wider range of residency programs. Now, you may, though, be an applicant who wants to target a certain type of program. Perhaps you do want to be a researcher or make that an important part of your career, whether it's a physician scientist or what have you. Well, then you may want to go a bit heavier on research specific experiences that you've done. So it's hard to say what's going to be right for everybody, but this is where, you know, when I speak with you, I'm happy to, you know, shed some light on that as it pertains to your particular situation. Staying with applications, when filling out the CE or SCV, if I've done many rotations in the US, can I combine 2 to 3 of them and list them as one experience? The answer is you can. But what I would say is this: the 10 experiences were created. Previously, we didn't have this limit of 10 experiences, but they were created so that people, the idea was not to have people stuff a whole bunch of things into one experience. Okay. So although you can consolidate a few things in a few experiences, you don't want to be in the situation where you're consolidating lots of things in 10 experiences. because if you are, you're not going to be able to do justice to those experiences, because a lot of your space in the description field is going to be taken up by many, many different things. And so you have to be a little bit strategic here. And if you want to do some combining, that's okay, even a few experiences, but I certainly wouldn't do that for the bulk of the 10 that you have. Somebody asked, if I want to do pulmonology in the future, but I'm also okay with hospital medicine, can I tell those competitive programs I want to be a pulmonologist, but tell less competitive programs I want to be a hospitalist, just for a bigger chance to match? Now, by competitive programs, I'm assuming this person is referring to programs that are harder to get into. Now, when you're talking about competitive programs, okay, let's say that you're trying to catch the attention of, shall we say, Washington University in St. Louis. You want to attract their interest as an internal medicine residency applicant. Well, when you look at the fellowship match rates, or what the alumni do. So if you want to see what the alumni do, you're going to find out that some alumni do subspecialties of internal medicine, and some alumni go into hospital medicine. And so telling a program that you want to do pulmonology versus hospital medicine at a competitive program isn't really going to help you. Like, telling them you want to do a subspecialty isn't going to really help you. Now, in a less competitive program, and again, I'm not entirely sure what is being meant by less competitive, but let's say that you're looking at a program and you look at their alumni and what they're doing, and perhaps the program, their mission is not to place people into fellowship. Maybe they're trying to produce primary care physicians, or maybe their focus is on something else. It's all about fit, right? So if you're trying to tell programs what they want to hear, I don't think that does a service to you, right? That's doing a disservice, because you want to basically tell a program what you're thinking. But if you're not sure what you're thinking, what's entirely acceptable is to say that you're keeping an open mind, right? In this case, this person is not sure about pulmonology, maybe hospital medicine. It could be something else as well. I can't tell you how many people say they want to be cardiologists, but by the time they get into their residency, they decide to be a primary care physician or a hospitalist. So one approach, when you're not sure, is to tell people that you're keeping an open mind and you want to explore the different possibilities, whether it's primary care, hospital medicine, subspecialties. So that's the way I would look at that. Question about mailing addresses or permanent address. So you have 2 address fields in your application. Does it have a real impact on interview decisions? So before we came up with geographic preferences, what programs would do when they were reviewing applications is they would look to see what someone's geographical interests were. And this was not a perfect science, but they would look at every aspect of the application to see what those interests might be. So they would look at the address, they look at where someone went to college, someone went to med school, where someone did their US clinical experience, where their hometown is. And the reason they would be looking at that stuff is when you look at people who've matched and you survey them after the match and you ask them, what are the most important factors you use to make your rank list decisions? At the top of the list is geography. So this has been well known for many, many years. So they've always been looking at geography as a way to gauge an applicant's interest in their program. And so since addresses have been a part of that equation, the answer to this question is yes. Does your address that you list have an impact on interview decisions? Absolutely. And so I want you all to think about, what address can you list? Some applicants will use their home country address. And if that is the only address you can offer, that's reasonable. But some applicants have family here in the US, right? Maybe their mom or dad's here, maybe their brother's here, or their sister's here. Those are other addresses you can potentially use. If you're here at the time when you submit your residency application, you can list that mailing address as your current mailing address. Now, some of you may say, well, what if they mail me something and I'm not there? Well, nowadays, nobody really mails you anything. So getting something physically by US postal mail is unusual. Now, if you are going to put an address down, you have to be ready to talk about that in an interview. So you can't just put down any address to take advantage of the fact that putting an address in the US might have an impact on interview decisions. You have to, be ready to explain why you put that address on there. Otherwise, they're going to look at you, they're going to have some suspicion, right? Well, why did you put that address there? So this has to also be carefully thought out. Personal statement. What should I put and not put in my personal statement? So in the book you're going to be getting, The Successful Match, there's a 50-page chapter on the personal statement. It goes into a lot of detail on what you should put in your personal statement. It has a list of questions that we encourage you to answer in depth to give you ideas, sort of like brainstorming content for your personal statement. And that's something I would highly encourage all of you to do. Now, what should you not put in your personal statement? So what I would say you shouldn't put in your personal statement is content about why you became a doctor. This is something that we commonly see in all applicant types. Doesn't matter if you're USMD, DO, and IMG. Now, as a member of the Residency Selection Committee, I can tell you my fellow committee members are not interested in why you wanted to become a doctor, because this is not medical school. You're applying for residency. Okay? So we want to know what it is about you that's going to make you a great internal medicine resident. What are those qualities? What is the vision for your career? What contributions do you want to make to the profession, to the residency program? Okay, so please don't spend time and space in your personal statement writing about why you wanted to be a doctor, because that space you have in your personal statement is valuable. There's not a lot of it, so you want to utilize that to give programs what they're looking for. Now, what else don't you want in your personal statement? You don't want a bland opening. So our personal statement has to start with something that catches the reader's attention. And that's one of the most important things you can do when you're developing your personal statement, because there are a lot of applications the application reviewer has to get through. If you catch their attention right from this get-go, then you're going to have them for the rest of the personal statement. So that's one of the things that I would recommend. So what to exactly mention in the personal statement? Again, I'm going to refer you to the Successful Match chapter on the personal statement, which goes into in-depth on what you can possibly put in there. And there's some examples too of high quality and well-regarded personal statements. So we had a question about how much do personal stories such as experiences with family or friends with mental health struggles matter in the personal statement. This is specifically for psychiatry. For every specialty, programs will be interested to know how your interest in that specialty evolved over time. They're especially interested to know that you have a commitment to that specialty. Now, how your interest evolved in a specialty, it varies. Like, everyone is unique. Your story is going to be different than someone else's story. But sometimes there's highly personal stories that influence our decision to go into a particular field. So if you're going into psychiatry and you had some experiences with family or friends who have suffered from mental health conditions, that can be potential content you can feature in your personal statement. Now, for this, how should I include them? This is where, for this particular person, I would encourage you to just reach out to me one-on-one so that I can help you with this part of the question. Is it better to tailor the personal statement to different programs? So you have the option of uploading many, many, many personal statements. You don't have to upload only one personal statement. You can create what are called program-specific personal statements. We actually did a podcast episode in our Success in Medicine podcast, again, available at thesuccessfulmatch.com, where we talk about tailoring the personal statement to an individual program. It can be a very effective way to catch the attention of the program. I'm a believer in personalizing statements to some programs. It's difficult, right, to do that to a large number of programs, right? That's what we apply to a lot of programs. That's very, very hard. But for the programs that you signal, I would encourage you to, if you can, to tailor it to those programs, right? And tailoring it to the program isn't throwing in one or two lines, okay? It's being very thoughtful about what you write. But if you do that, the interview yield from the signal that you send can increase, okay? So imagine a residency program that gets 400 signals. They're only going to interview 200 people. Okay? They have to figure out which 200 to interview. So if you have one applicant, two applicants who are equally qualified, and one wrote a program-specific personal statement that was effective, and the other one just had a personal statement that they sent to every program, who do you think they're more likely to consider for an interview? So that's what I want you to think about. We had some questions about visas. Of course, this is on a lot of people's minds right now. The question is, how will the current administration affect a visa requiring IMGs this cycle? Another question was, are programs less keen on providing visas? I've heard that many applicants who were unable to start last year due to visa issues were deferred to the cycle. Do you think this will significantly reduce the number of available resident spots this year? So starting with the first question, how will the current administration affect visa requiring IMGs this cycle? So, unfortunately, the situation here with the current administration has been such that the timing of it all couldn't be worse. And the hope is that things are going to settle down, that we're going to have, more clear policies. We're not going to do this. One day we're doing this, one day we're doing that. So there's a lot of unpredictability right now. It sometimes seems like there's no clear direction. Like, what is going on? When is it going to happen? But I suspect that over time, things will be more clear. And there's not going to be this yo-yo effect where things are just up in the air. Once things settle down, that will ease the worries and concerns that everybody has, all the stakeholders have in this process. This is not the first time we've had problems with visas. Okay, if you look at the history of the match year after year, even in quote unquote perfect times where there is an instability, there are people every year that have problems getting their visa. Programs that are IMG friendly realize this. And every year there are some people who may not start on time. They may start a week late, a month late, sometimes 2 or 3 months later. That's something that programs take into account, are very well aware of that could happen. What's different this year, of course, is there's a larger numbers of people. Okay? And in terms of how it's going to affect people moving forward, if we go back to the pandemic, we also had visa problems then. We had all kinds of problems in different countries around the world with their ministries of health, getting paperwork done. Ministries were closed, delays were there. If you look at the match data, that didn't really affect the percentage of people matching the following years. Okay? Now, it remains to be seen what this situation will, how will this impact the future match? But we'll have to see what happens in the next couple of months. If a lot of the people that have had their visas on hold because there were no interviews to be had or paperwork processing delays, if things get sorted out and a lot of those people are able to start in the next couple of months, then I don't anticipate a lot of problems in the next cycle, so long as the administration becomes more stable in their processes. Okay, so that is what we have to see, and we'll keep a close eye on it. Now, as far as many applicants were unable to start last year due to visa issues were deferred, again, we're going to have to see what those numbers are, and hopefully in the next couple of months we'll get a better idea. We'll be able to answer the question: will it reduce the number of available residency spots this year, and if so, to what extent? Okay, some residency interview questions. I see how programs value how candidates interact with staff. How do they judge this if interviews are online and many of us aren't in the country to attend meet and greets? So from the moment you submit your application, after that point, everything can be considered part of your residency interview. So your residency interview does not start on the day of your interview. It starts after you submit your application and all the way through to the rank order list and the matching process. So that whole process. So what do I mean by that? Well, after you submit your application, any contact or communication you have with the residency program becomes part of your residency interview. So if you send a letter of interest to a residency program, that's going to be inspected very, very carefully. So that gives them some sense of how you interact with their program staff. Perhaps not in person, but in writing. When you accept an interview offer, how you respond to that interview offer gives them more information about your overall ability to interact. When you're getting closer to the interview day and you check in with the program, again, that's another data point. If you attend a pre-interview meet and greet where you're hanging out with the residents, even if you're not there in person and you're on Zoom, they're going to be assessing you. Right? And then, of course, on the interview day itself. Now, it is true that if your interviews are online, right, or they're virtual interviews, that there are fewer data points. And that is one of the things that some programs are not so thrilled with virtual interviews, because in the old days, when you came in person, you'd be there for 8 or 9 hours. And in an 8 hour, 9 hour period of time, they could have multiple people interact with you and they could get a lot of data points. Okay? But they will use whatever they can in lieu of in-person interactions, right? So whatever they can figure out online, they will use to help them make decisions about your fit with their program. How should I schedule my interview? Should I schedule interviews for my top choice programs in November, December, or January, February? So my recommendation to you is to schedule interviews with programs that you truly covet in December or January, and not in October and November, because you need time to get yourself ready to make a strong impression on programs. And you need a bit of practice, right? And you'll be doing that through your interview prep. But if you select your first few interviews at programs that are not highest on your list, then that'll give you a chance to get acclimated to the whole interview process and will help ease your stress levels and help you realize what you need to do to shine at interviews with programs that are your top choice programs. So that's why I would recommend December or January. There's no evidence from a lot of research that interviewing late or early has any effect whatsoever on your rank order list. Geographic preferences. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because we'll tackle this in a future webinar. Do you recommend selecting geographic preferences in ERAS? If so, what would be a good reason to provide when doing so? This largely depends on your specialty, as well as percentage of programs that are in certain geographic regions. If the bulk of the programs that would be friendly to your situation as an applicant are in 3 geographic regions, then that would be a strong argument to identify those 3 geographic regions as your geographic preferences. Now, what's a good reason to provide when doing so? That's going to be different from one applicant to another. What I would say to you, though, is don't put in a single city in the description field for why are you selecting this geographic preference. The geographic region is a wide region, right? But if you put in, I have family in Chicago, that's not going to appeal to the programs in Michigan, because even though they're in the same region, Chicago is not in Michigan, right? So what you don't want to do is inadvertently harm yourself by being very, very restrictive in your description. But more on that in a future webinar. Same thing with program signals. We're going to talk more about that in a future webinar. But in summary, what you want to do with your program signals is select them based on high quality research. How does your profile match up to their criteria? How are your interests aligned with their mission? That's the concept of fit. Those are some of the things that you're going to have to look at to decide which programs to signal. We'll talk more about that in a future webinar. And that brings us to the end of today's session. I know I've gone a little bit long, but you all had a lot of questions. I know that there were some questions that I didn't tackle, but if you are one of those people that had a question that I wasn't able to address, please know that I do want to address that with you. Okay, so Alyssa, let me hand it over to you.
All righty. Well, I just want to say thank you guys for joining us tonight for our webinar, and we hope that this was useful for you. Obviously, we enjoy answering your guys' questions because we want this to be as beneficial to you as possible. I just wanted to say that if there's anything that you would like to discuss with us at the end of this webinar, feel free to reach out to any one of us on our team. Please don't hesitate. We are more than happy to have a conversation with you. You can reach out to Dr. Desai or your client service associate, and we would be happy to speak with you and clear up any concerns that you may have, even if they're not about rotations or they're not about the residency match. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we just want to be able to make sure that you guys are able to succeed and that we can help you and give you the tools that you need to do that. So like I said, once again, for anything and everything, just feel free to reach out to us. So I think that's it from me. We hope that you guys have a great night, and I will go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Desai for last remarks.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to all of you for attending this webinar today. As Alyssa said, we care very deeply about your future. We want to do everything we can to support you. We hope to have that day with you down the road, right, in March, where we celebrate your accomplishment. We want you to reach your goals, and we want to do everything we can to do that. And there's a lot of different things we can do, but remember that I'm always in your corner, as is the entire team. So I want you to ever feel like you're alone. So if you have doubts, questions, you're feeling insecure about something, you're not sure what direction to take it, all you have to do is reach out to us. And again, doesn't matter if it's during the rotation, 2 weeks after rotation, 2 months later, we're here for you. That's part of our program. That's how we wanted to build this, because we believe that, being there for you and offering you the wisdom of our experience is something that can be helpful. And so in closing, I just want to wish you happy 4th of July, just a few days away. Hope you have a great 4th of July holiday. Look forward to talking with all of you soon. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a happy 4th of July and have a great night.